you make a living as being a musician? Simple as that.
No.
And how? No, right. So no, right. Pretty much no. Because it's obviously changed quite a lot in the last 10 years significantly. Obviously the way to earn money as a band has significantly had to be changed. Many bands are having to try and do it from obviously on the road, because you're not really making money from albums. So that doesn't really kind of cover you. Merch, with the percentage that you have to give to venues, that doesn't really cover it. So a lot of bands, the only way that a lot of touring musicians can do it is by being on the road a lot more than they wanted to. So whereas they may have gone on tour for 3-4 months of a year, they're now trying to be out on tour for up to 10 months a year, so that they're constantly getting that revenue from the live performances. Because from the way I see it from a band point of view is you're constantly paying for things. You're not really getting anything coming in. You might get a bit of money from a gig if you get a reasonable turnout, and you might sell a bit of merch, which just about covers your merch costs. But you're always paying for your rehearsals, your fuels, traveling to gigs, putting out new albums, whether that's from home recordings or whether that's through digital or whatever it might be. So I'm intrigued especially from Dave and Al's point of view as current bands that are currently working within the scene, is like, how do you see yourselves earning money within it? Obviously, if it's just a hobby, it's just a hobby. But obviously, no one just goes into it the mindset of, if it's just a hobby, you just play some gigs and you write a few songs here and there and you go, yeah, I'll be fine. But obviously, you're putting music out there. How could you see yourself being able to earn money where you could actually put this as almost a permanent job?
So I think to answer your question, what you asked, no, you can't as a musician. As a creator, yeah, you probably could. As a business owner, yes. And I think nowadays you can't just be a musician. You've got to have a business. You've got to look at it from a business plan. You've got to look at it from profit loss. You've got to look at it, right, what are we putting in? What are we getting out of it? What can we change? What do we have to sell to be able to make the next target? For example, we're back in the studio. So for us, we know how much the studio is going to cost us. We know how much renting is going to cost us. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by CDs. We do that by merch. We do that by taking gigs that are going to pay, and they're going to pay effective money. By that, I mean, not just 4 beers behind the jump and, £10 of petrol money, because that doesn't really go far now. So no, but there are ways to do it. Be a content creator, not just YouTube. I mean, like, create content in many different ways. So that's how I would do it.
Okay.
And it's working. We're not really out of pocket. We're able to filter that back in to then get it back out to sell products to put it back in. So
okay, what about yourself, Al? Because obviously it's that balancing act of, you still got to do your day job because you've got to pay your mortgage, you still got to pay all those sort of costs that are coming out. So there's that, you've got to do a day job, which is what we're seeing in even significant bands. I would say there are still bands out there that are doing the festival circuits, they're doing tours, but when they finish, they come back off that, they do their 4 weeks, 5 weeks out, and then they go back into whatever it is they do as their day job. Some of them got jobs as plumbers, some of them do part-time work, some are lorry drivers, some are, you name it, they're out there doing these other types of jobs, which is to give them their revenue so that they can go back out on tour again. But so Al, from your point of view, how do you see a revenue stream as a musician, if you were to go down that?
In a kind of multifaceted, but I hope fairly short and sweet answer. So my old band, our impression was that we would get a name out there for ourselves and make it by doing loads and loads of shows. So in 2010, we did 56 gigs in a year. It's a lot. It was like most weekends, if not every week. As a matter of fact, it was pretty much every weekend, sometimes Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all around the UK, doing bits and pieces. But we missed a trick because we never released, as Dave said, that content, that media that people could consume post-gig. And that ultimately, if I'm being honest with you, was the reason why when we ended up having a fairly brief but real conversation with a label, they said, right, you know, what demos have you got and what content have you created and what music videos have you done? We're like, well, we've got a couple of singles that we did in our guitarist bedroom, and that wasn't enough, obviously, because we've been too focused on just playing shows and touring. But I think being in a band and being very, very good at what you do is one thing, but actually making a living off it is incredibly hard. So a little while ago, I watched the While She Sleeps documentary. While She Sleeps are now 5 albums deep, and they released their first album, this 6, and Brainwashed, and at the end of that they were still having, as you said, having to do casual work to make rent. So this is a band that's on, I saw them on the Metal Hammer tour with Silosis in 2012. At that point they're still doing that part-time, if you will. They haven't made a living as yet. They did a crowdfunder to raise the money for So What, their 4th album, and the only the reason that they are now getting to a point where they're able to live it and breathe it every single day is they did 2 things. One, they bought a warehouse and then kitted it out as a studio, so they had their own studio. They could store all their tour gear there, and I think at one point their guitarist was living there. But the second thing they did was they created what's called the Sleep Society. So they made it like a club. So that is, I'm sure you're all familiar with like Patreons. So
yeah,
you pay a certain amount a month and you get a certain amount of, you know, secret tracks, secret videos. They then started invited some of their real hardcore fans to what they call Sleeps Brothers, which is what their warehouse unit in Sheffield's called. They would invite hardcore fans over for parties, like, you know, like album listening parties or gig rundown parties or whatever it was they were doing. But all of that was created through social media and essentially like an internet following that allowed them to expand their horizons and then basically take control of their own music. So in no uncertain terms, be it making a living off of original music these days is harder than it's ever been, because on social media you are competing with the clickbait stupid videos, or, you know, the Instagram influencers, let's call them, you know, that are varying, you know, either TikTok challenges or chicks running around with no clothes on, like, to rap songs or whatever it is, and it's very easy to fall into the sort of background noise. You have to have a kind of USB. It has to be relevant and regular, and that's very, very difficult to do. It's very easy to say every day this week I will do a Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter post, but to have something that's actually relevant and live a normal life, you know, hold down a normal job, is really difficult. And I think that particularly if you are coming into this with existing commitments, it's nigh on impossible, because you have to live and breathe it. You know, like as I said, in my old band, we did live and breathe it pretty much. I you know, the job I do now, I happily would admit that I would have walked away from it in 2012 if the right offer had come in for a European UK tour or whatever, if I thought it was going to make enough money to make ends meet. But once you get to a point where you have commitments, whether it be family, whether it be property, whether it be whatever else, it becomes even harder, because life is expensive and it is very, very difficult to get in front of the right people. And actually, as you say, with people taking cuts from merch and people taking cuts from this, that and the other, and no money really coming in from streaming, it's really, really difficult. So of course it's doable because people do it, but these days I think that you have to spend an awful lot of time at your desk creating really like interesting content of some description about your band to get yourself out there, and ultimately you got to spend money. but in a different way to what I used to think you did with like PR and like AR agents and whatnots. You're now talking about paying Instagram or Facebook to boost your posts, and then influencers to react to this and this, that, and the other. It's completely changed, and it's, as I say, if you're trying to hold down any sort of job and a family, that's a real tough ask.
Yeah, Dave, can I just contribute to this point then? Because we mention this regularly, don't we? So what you learn now, it's so important to own the masters and the publishing rights of your music. But even if you own those, how do you get to that A-level, that top tier, the higher echelon? It's more or less impossible, isn't it? To me, what was symbolic, where you said, is it possible to make a living, I think was your question.
Yeah.
No, we know that probably 0.5%, Metallica and bands like that, they'll always make a living. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're the first band in the age of streaming to probably even shift 1 million units of vinyl, for that new album, which would be an incredible achievement. But when that bass player from Nightwish quit, is he called Marcus?
Marco, yeah.
Marco, you just assume that they're millionaires, don't you, when you look at them? Just look at the show that they put on, the album sales in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they cracked America. So I think what you learn there, that deal that they're in with Nuclear Blast, who are rightly so a respected label in the world of metal, they're clearly taking most of that money from streaming platforms. So the next question is, what has changed in this dynamic? The consumer has benefited now, hasn't it? We don't have to save up dinner money at school, to go and buy an album from the local CD shop. They don't even exist now, do they? Everyone can access it, and a subscription. So Spotify, 70% of those royalties should go to the artist. What you find is probably 60% of that slice goes to the record company, because they own the publishing rights, they own the originals. So picking up on Dave's point, there should be no shame now in saying you do have to be a businessman. You need to be entrepreneurial. Look at Matt Heafy of Trivium. Apparently he makes $10,000 a month on Twitch. That's bringing, and then add touring into that, and then that's going to boost merch sales. He'll have his own line of merchandise. But those days when you used to look at a band like Motley Crue and think, I just want to live that lifestyle, get on a major label, make millions, that would be impossible now. A major label won't touch you if you're a metal band. They're not going to make any money out of you. And then when you also look at that idea of, okay, can I support myself by doing the usual thing like Alan said, which is very honourable, 56 shows in 1 year, put everything into it, and the ups and downs, but also that shared sense of euphoria that the four of you had, where you're all connected on this common goal, must be magical to experience that. I wish I'd ever done that in any form of collective. But that's not enough now, is it? You can't just tour and rely on merch sales, because there could be venues that take 25% of your merch sales that night. So my final point is, any form of industry where there are millions at stake will attract what an economist will call a rent seeker, who is known as an unproductive person who is just skimming money and they're not doing anything for it. Those people are intelligent now. So as a musician, you've almost got to become an intermediary yourself and a rent seeker, which is a dirty word. And as you said, Dave, diversify your revenue streams. What are they? We're now in a stage where Patreon is the first step, where we're looking at it as producers, and maybe not me, I'm a consumer, thinking, okay, this is something that might catch on. It's almost as if, like with While She Sleeps, of course you get something great for that. You almost feel like a taxpayer, don't you? And you're not going to hold that band to account, be like, hey, I'm paying for this, I want something great. And if you want to continue to deserve my money, what are you producing? I know there's going to be loyalty as well, and there's also an element of passion, isn't it, where money doesn't come into it. So that's the first stage where you guys, because I'm a consumer, you're starting to look at ideas, how can we claw back some of this money? But at the moment, the answer is no, because it's so heavily in favour of the consumer who's just not going to pay £15 for a piece of plastic when they can pay £15 a month and have access to every song in the fucking world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just while you were talking, I just remembered this very quickly. You guys might remember a rapper from about 10 years ago called Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. There's a song on his first album that talks about the first record label they were asked to sign. That was for, as we now know, a platinum selling record. Their split from their deal was 7% for the two of them. That was what they took, 7%.
Yeah.
So Lord knows what that looks like in numbers, but neither one of them is walking away with like 100 million quid, are they?
No. It's scary.
But the
Andy,
label might.
No, label's
yeah.
going to make it. Yeah. Andy, you got any thoughts on this?
Well, he's already touched on about Patreon. I mean, I just was thinking about our friends in Kane.
Yeah.
You know, another really hard-working band who are doing something on Patreon that I'm quite new to. You introduced me to it, and it's just another sort of revenue stream. It's another way of sort of setting you apart from some other bands. You know, they're using Patreon in a great way. There's different sort of levels. You know, the content has got to be good to earn your money, but they're also sort of repaying their patrons, if that's the right term, with sort of exclusive T-shirts and CDs and the like. So, but yeah, I agree with everybody else. It's nigh on impossible nowadays to make a living from music in any genre, I would say, unless you're very, very, very lucky.
Yeah. Sticks, what about yourself? Because obviously you've done some of these, you've done like the Cambridge, you did Strawberry Fair and stuff, so you've seen a lot of bands kind of going through the scene, etc. So what about you with the experience in these sort of bands? I mean, Tonight probably would be a guy that's kind of doing some things right, I guess. But what else have you seen? Have you seen bands that are doing the right sort of things to kind of make it moving themselves forward?
Tony, or Tonight, is one of the examples I've actually got written down here that I've been making notes on. So for me, making a living in music depends on exactly what it is you want to do and how you're doing it. So if you're purely doing your own stuff, purely doing originals, you're not going to make a living out of it anymore. If you're willing to do the graft and a few other bits as well and change your perception on it, you can make a living as a musician. So for example, Tony, I know as a friend, he goes out of a weekend, he's in a wedding covers band. Still a musician, he's playing someone else's music though, and getting paid quite well to do so. As I've got a few other friends who also do covers bands of a weekend, weddings and events, everything like that. So that's where their main money is coming in as a musician. And then during the week, they're working on their own projects, whether it be busking, recording, anything like that, and getting a bit of an income that way. So you can make a living out of being purely a musician. It's just what type of musician do you want to be?
Interesting. I'm going to wrap this one up as this was the last topic for tonight. So one of the things I kind of think is we've seen it with like big bands or relatively big bands or known bands like the band The Darkness, Justin Hawkins, I think I'm guessing his name. He, in the last year, set up a YouTube channel, and actually that's one of his main revenue streams now. So he goes on, he talks, he actually does reactions, he talks about latest news, latest topics, and actually because he gets a decent subscriber viewpoint, he actually makes some decent revenue on that. So he's had to diversify his revenue stream because doing the headlining shows with The Darkness is not going to cover it. It's just not going to pay the revenue that he was used to when he was doing the albums and CDs. Even with us on this channel, we'll put a video out every day and you go, wow, yeah, great, you're doing that, you're putting a video out. And if we get 100, 150 views, we're like, great. If we get the 5,000, 10,000 views, even better. But there are 3.7 million videos being uploaded every single day to YouTube. So we're put our videos up against 3.7 million other videos also out there trying to put content out. So it's the same as Spotify. Everyone's putting new albums, new singles out. So you're competing with this huge, vast variety.
Is this your way of saying we're not getting paid?
Huh?
Is this your way of
you're
saying
getting nothing, mate. Nothing. I'll send you some custard, mate. All right.
Mate, as long as it's ambrosia and Devon.
Gotta have the ambrosia, mate. But I was just saying, it's how the value has changed. The same as how we talk about the value of DVDs or movies has changed. So streaming platforms, Netflix, you pay a certain money, Spotify, you pay the money. I was just saying to Andy, I went out today to a place up in Amersham Way and I bought 1,000 DVDs for 20 quid. Literally 10 massive big boxes just full of random DVDs, collections. And I'm like, that's okay, there was some duplication in there, but 600 completely original DVDs. And I'm like, great. They're all like duplicate, like box sets and all sorts of stuff, because they're not worth anything anymore because of streaming platforms. And I was trying to explain to the guy, he was like, why are you buying all these DVDs? And I went, well, actually, there is a value to them for me, because a lot of this stuff won't be available on streaming platforms, because streaming platforms recycle and recycle. And the other thing I really like about DVDs is they have all the bonus features on, which you don't get on streaming platforms. And that's why I go after that. But that's, if I was to go back 10 years ago, there is no way I'd get 1,000 DVDs for 20 quid. And unfortunately, that's where the models change. And the same thing has happened within the music. So what you've now got to do is you've got to completely diversify everything you do. It can't just be about doing one YouTube channel. It can't just be about putting one type of video out of your channel. So if you're in a band, and I've seen a lot of bands think, well, the content they're going to do is video from rehearsal studio. No random person's going to pick that up. That's only going to be fans of the band. And they're only going to watch it 1 or 2 times. If you keep posting rehearsal videos, there's only so many times you can rehearse, and they're going to see the same songs time and time again. So you've got to think about what that content is going to be. One of our best videos in the last few days is actually some of the shorts that Andy shot from Metals to Masses final.
Yay.
So I posted, basically, he did the video of the sentient wall of death thing. I didn't have time to put it into the final video. So I just posted it. It was 40 seconds as a short, and that got loads of views for the channel, and they can be monetized. So it's about thinking about using the shorts, doing your TikToks, you've got to be on about 8-9 different platforms constantly posting. And what's really weird is it goes against our common nature, because what you're sitting there going, look at me, look at me, look at me, posting in groups, posting on web pages, and you think, do you know what, I'm being an annoying git here and just putting this footage in front of people. But you've got to remember that within about 30-40 seconds, that footage is going to have disappeared down the timeline. So you've just got to keep doing it. You've just got to keep posting, keep putting your stuff out there. But my biggest challenge for me doing it from a video content, not necessarily just from a band point of view, is the amount of time it takes. It's a full-time bloody job. And that's your hard bit as a band right now, is that if you want to do all those extra bits of content to promote your band, you've got 8 hours a day that you've got to find to do that. Because you can't just post at 6 o'clock in the evening when everyone else gets in from work. You've got to think about your other time zones. You've got to think in the early mornings. You've got to schedule things in. You've got to think about when you can do a web chat or a live stream. And you've got to contact all the little reaction channels that are going to help you out and get your videos out there. Because if you go to the big reaction channels, they're not going to touch you with a barge pole. They'll be like, you're not going to get me any views, but you need to. So there's so much that people need to do. And I think that's the biggest problem for bands right now, is how do you find the extra 8 hours in a day and know what to do with that time? Because where do you start? It's like we were talking about going back through the band back catalogues. You've got 10 albums to do. It's the same with when you're trying to think about how you move your band forward, is where do you start? It's easy to post a post on Facebook about you've got a gig coming up, you've got a new release, you've got your Spotify, and you can do your YouTube channel, but what else are you going to do? And I think that's the hard bit for a band to make a living. You've almost got to do 8 hours extra work and hit all the platforms and work about where all your revenue streams are going to be, and whether it's on Twitch, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's TikTok. And you're going to have to be on every single platform out there promoting and putting content out. And that's the hard bit. And I don't know how people are going to do it. You've got to do 2 jobs effectively, unfortunately.
At least.
At least.